Hello, welcome to week 8. If you're watching this video, it's because you were gone or are planning on being gone on either one or both of our synchronous days. So this week we have week 8 Google Slides to turn in, and then we are going to officially wrap up reading chapter 18. We're going to read pages 261 to 272 in class on our first synchronous day, and then it's your job before the next synchronous day which would either be Thursday or Friday, to finish reading chapter 18. And then those of you that are doing honors credit, I have an honors option for you. It's using Actively Learn. If you remember, we used that website a couple weeks ago with a video that we watched with Amy Tan. So if you need a refresher on how to use it or how to log in, let me know. But that is going to be in Canvas. And also a reminder, last Friday was the day to turn in all of your library books. So excluding those of you that borrowed a Born a Crime book from me or from the library, those you can turn back at the end of this week, but everything else needs to be turned in. So please make sure you do that. Okay, let's start off with some review. So in chapter 16, because 16 and 17 were what you read last week for async, Trevor talks about working in Alex and with his friend Bongani selling pirated CDs, basically running a loan business, I guess. So I want you to describe what is the hood. Alex is what he's referring to. What is it like? How does he describe it? What are some attributes of this area? So go ahead and write a list down. Okay, let's do some review. So in chapter 16, we learn what Trevor did right after high school. He had planned to go to college and wanted to do like a computer programming major or degree, but he didn't have enough money, and so he was just planning to kind of take a year off to get enough to save enough money, which ended up being 3 years. And so he didn't live in Alex, but he basically worked there and hung out there with his friends doing their little business. And the chapter is called The Cheese Boys because they talked about how in Alex, if you had enough money to buy cheese for your food, you were considered kind of more wealthy. And then he talks a lot about what the hood was like and attributes of it and how people look out for each other, but also it's really hard to leave. And then we find out that his DJing business kind of ends at one point because there's a party that happens and the cops are called because of noise, and the cop ends up like destroying his computer. So he is officially done with that, and he maybe would have continued on living that kind of lifestyle, but there's an incident that happens that really changes his mind. So one of his friends steals a camera from luggage that came from the airport, and Trevor was going to resell it for money, but then he sees the pictures of the family on this camera and decides, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I'm coming face to face with the people I'm essentially stealing from. So, chapter 17, I want you to describe to me what was Trevor's time in jail like, because this chapter talks about the incident where he goes to jail. He gets caught and doing something illegal, and I want you to describe what was it like. Why did he end up in jail for a week? What was the story there? So go ahead and pause this video and write your response. Okay, so let's do some review of the chapter itself. So we know that Trevor kind of dabbled in a few illegal things, and we know that his stepdad was a mechanic, and so he had lots of cars that he was working on around their house. And Trevor borrowed one of Abel's cars to go sell some cell phones in the suburb to kind of flip it for profit. He gets pulled over by a cop, and the cop finds out that the car doesn't belong to Trevor and that the license plate doesn't even match. So he kind of had two things going wrong there. So Trevor ends up being arrested, taken to jail. He spends the night, and he kind of learns about a stereotype that colored people in jail or prisons were gangsters and really tough. And so because of the color of his skin, he tries to kind of pretend like he is that stereotype and to try to just hold out for as long as he was going to be there. And it works for the most part. People are kind of intimidated and scared by him, even though he's totally faking it. And then we hear him talk about this man who came in to the same cell as him, and he seemed super intimidating, he just looked like a criminal if you were to make an assumption about him. And he starts trying to talk to one of the cops, but the cop is speaking a different language. And so Trevor knows both of them and tries both languages and tries to step in and translate. And then Trevor realizes that the man's kind of just a big teddy bear. He's not really as intimidating or a criminal like what you might assume. He starts to get to know him. And then we hear Trevor's thoughts about jail and kind of the justice system, and at least in South Africa, how it's kind of a lottery. There's not really justice to it, is what he was saying. So eventually the judge sets bail, and Trevor was paid, somebody paid for his bail. He was free to go. So he spends the night at his cousin's house and then comes back to his house and tries to play it cool like nothing happened, even though he was gone for a week. But his mom knew about it the whole time. She was the one that paid the bail. And then we're reminded that she's trying to do what she can to discipline him and help him, but she reminds him that the world doesn't love you. So that was chapter 17. Okay, so for synchronous day 1, which would either be Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on your cohort, we will be reading pages 261 to 272. So whatever is left over, that will be your job to read for async, which would be 273 to 282. So after reading that portion, I want you to look at this quote. I saw more than anything that relationships are not sustained by violence, but by love. Love is a creative act. When you love someone, you create a new world for them. What does Trevor mean when he says you create a new world? What is he talking about? So give me your thoughts on that. Write that down. Okay, second question. Trevor says, growing up in a home of abuse, you struggle with the notion that you can love a person you hate or hate a person you love. It's a strange feeling. You want to live in a world where someone is good or bad, where you either hate them or love them, but that's not how people are. So I want you to give me your perspective on this quote. Do you agree with him that people are complex and it's not just this or that? Or do you think that people can fit into certain categories and they're not as complex as Trevor says? So tell me if you agree or disagree and tell me why. Okay, so that was synchronous day 1. So remember, you need to have this part of chapter 18 read, because we're going to read like the little epilogue part that's in a different font on synchronous day 2. And then honors, we have the Cisneros, and oh my gosh, Sandra Cisneros' only daughter activity on Actively Learn. So if you need help with this or have questions, please let me know. Okay, day 2. So for more review, because this is a pretty packed chapter, Trevor says, people say all the time that they'd do anything for the people they love. But would you really? Would you do anything? Would you give everything? I don't know that a child knows that kind of selfless love. A mother, yes. A mother will clutch her children and jump from a moving car to keep them from harm. She will do it without thinking. But I don't think the child knows how to do that. Not instinctively. It's something the child has to learn. So what do you think? Do you agree? Do you think that people really, when they say that they would do anything for the people they love, would they really? Or is that kind of determined by circumstance? So tell me your thoughts on that quote. Okay, so some chapter 18 review. So we find out that after a long time of Trevor begging his mom and pleading with her that she needed to leave Able and she needed to move on, she does. She moves eventually to Highlands North and she meets somebody new and she moves there with Andrew and Isaac. And years pass. Trevor, he doesn't really describe how he got his career started, which would be interesting to find out. But he started his own life. He starts working as a comedian, doing shows, doing TV stuff. And then one Sunday, he gets a call from his brother Andrew saying that his mom has been shot. And without even asking who it was, he just knew it was Able. So she had been shot in the leg, in the butt, and in the head. she got shot in the face right in between her nose and her lips, but it was through the back of her head. And we read about a section where Trevor's at the hospital. His mom's been taken back. The doctors are trying to assess what's going on. And the nurse tells him that there's no insurance. She doesn't have any insurance, so she can't be helped at that hospital. She might have to move to a different one. And Trevor is in a haze. He's like, what are you talking about? You have to fix my mom. She could die. And she was saying, well, it's going to cost a lot of money, and I don't know if you would be prepared for that. And so Trevor has this moment where she keeps telling him, like, it could cost this much, it could cost this much, she might be in the ICU for this long. And Trevor has this moment where he thinks about what would his mom want him to do. If she got shot in the head, what's the likelihood that she would survive? Would she want him to just pay whatever money he could to try to save her? And then what happens if she ended up dying? Would that be for nothing? He reminds us of this idea of the black tax, and how my mother's greatest fear was that I would end up paying the black tax, that I would get trapped by the cycle of poverty and violence that came before me. So he has a real moment of contemplation where he doesn't know what to do, and then ultimately he gives the nurse his credit card and says, do whatever you have to do to save my mom. The doctors stabilize Patricia, and the doctors tell him that what happened to her was a miracle. They don't like to use that word, but it was an absolute miracle, because if the bullet had moved even a hair up or down to the side, she might not have made it. So Trevor comes back to the hospital. He sees her the very next day. He starts crying, and she, of course, handles it with humor and grace like she always does. So we're going to read the epilogue together. It's this portion that is kind of in a different colored font. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so that's it. That is the book. We're done. So I want you to give me your overall thoughts. I want you to tell me, what are your overall thoughts about the book? What was your favorite or maybe most interesting part? Is there any other thoughts that you have? What did you think about his story and his life? Did you think, would you recommend reading this again, or at least having future students read this? So tell me your thoughts on that. Okay, so now we are done with the book and we need to work on our projects. And I want to kind of go through some of those questions that I asked in that Google form a couple weeks ago. So, what is the point of writing an essay? A lot of you told me to demonstrate your knowledge of the book or the text to the teacher by writing about it. In a way, yes, you would be right, but really the point of writing an essay is to use critical thinking skills in writing, to analyze a text, to interact with it using reasoning by showing evidence to support your points. You need to be able to have the skill to look at a piece of information, a text, and analyze it on a deeper level and use evidence from that text to support what you're saying. There's going to be lots of moments in life where you need to prove a point, or where you need to, if you have an argument or a stance on something or a perspective, if you want it to be solid, you need to be able to support it in some way. So that is really the ultimate point, the purpose of writing an essay. So what parts are included? For the most part, we got this correct on the form. An intro and a thesis. We need a body, and we need a conclusion. And within the body, you're going to have things like analysis and evidence, reasoning, explaining. But I want to put something in your brain that you might not have been told before, but it is true. So yes, these are the components of an essay, but there's really no such thing as a 5-paragraph essay. I know that might have been taught to you in the past, that an essay is 5 paragraphs. It's an intro thesis paragraph, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion paragraph. And yes, it's a good way to get started with writing, but when you look at actual text in the real world, even some of the stuff that you'll look at next year and in your junior year or in college, writing is not put into a box like that. It's not categorized and just perfectly fit, because sometimes you can't communicate everything that you need to in 5 paragraphs. Sometimes it has to be longer than that. A lot of times it is longer than that. So I don't want to confuse you, but I want to just bring that up to you and know that your essay does not have to be 5 paragraphs. It shouldn't, really. I would say it's going to normally be longer than that. So if you have questions about this idea, if that's a little bit confusing, please let me know. But I want to put that into your brain and into your memory because you're going to see that as you get older, the 5-paragraph essay is kind of a model that we use in the very beginning with middle school and maybe even elementary school. But we're getting older and we need to move on from that. So let's talk about summary and analysis. Summary is when you put something in your own words by highlighting the most important parts of the text or an idea. So you're trying to give a good overview. But analysis is when you are examining a point or an argument using evidence to support that point or argument. So summaries are good and they're necessary, but they're different than analysis. And analysis is really what we're going to be looking at with your projects. That's what I'm going to be assessing to see if you become proficient in the skills and standards in this area. So let me give you an example. Hopefully this makes sense. If I were to summarize Frozen, I might say something like, when the newly crowned Queen Elsa accidentally uses her power to turn things into ice to curse her home into an infinite winter, her sister Anna teams up with the Mountain Man, his playful reindeer, and a snowman to change the weather condition. This is a summary, an overall idea of what this story is about. If I were to analyze this story, I might say something like this. Through the character development in the show, we see how humans are complex and not always what they appear on the surface. For example, Anna learns there is more to her sister Elsa than she previously realized. So you are not just summarizing with analysis, you are looking at something specific and you're given an example to back up your point. Okay, so for the rest of, or for a good portion of Synchronous Day 2, we are going to be working on our projects. So I want you to just get started if you haven't already. I want you to open up a Google Doc, start that essay, have Canva open. If you were in class, I would be walking around helping, answering questions. So this is work time. I want you to use it wisely because I'm giving it to you in class, which means if you're gone on Synchronous Day 2 of this week, use your time wisely that you have at home to get working on this because it's now going to be due in 2 weeks. Okay, lastly, we have First Chapter Friday, and today we have The Sun is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. So this is a young adult novel that was so popular that they turned it into a movie. So you can take a look at the trailer for the movie. It'll give you a good idea of the story, but basically the premise is that it's kind of an immigrant story. We have 2 teenagers who meet in one day. The story takes place in about a day, and they really connect and they fall in love, but there is the danger of having to leave the US that threatens their relationship. So I want you to take a look at that. And that's all I have. So if you have any questions, let me know. But that's all for week 8.